live show is brought to you by Garden Express and Yates.
Garden Express are Australia's leading mail ordering service, offering a wide range of quality gardening products. Each week on the Garden Gurus Live, the team at Garden Express will share a weekly offer. So make sure after today's show, you jump online and visit their website.
From indoor plant care to garden weed control products, Yates is the secret to a thriving garden. Later in the show, the team at Yates will share their top gardening tips and tricks for you to try this weekend. And for more advice to make your garden bloom, head to yates.com.au.
Hello again, and welcome back to another episode of Garden Gurus Live, where you get the opportunity to ask all your gardening questions directly to one of us, the Garden Gurus. Once again this week, we are giving you the opportunity to win a $50 Garden Express gift voucher simply by sending in your questions, and we'll pick our favourite question of the day, and that will be the winner. Thanks to all of you who've already got questions through via Messenger or through the email during the week. It really helps us get the show going. Remember, include your location. It really helps me answer your questions and give you really specific advice based on where you live. We had so many questions last week that apparently Trevor couldn't answer them all, but we'll be carrying off from where he left off last week. Now, before we get into it, we're going to ask you to do us a favour. So if you could tag all your friends on the comments below, and remember to share the live right now, so it helps to build up our audience and get lots more questions and lots more information sharing about gardening. So having a look at the weather wrap for today, in Perth, it's really muggy. And apparently it's going to get to 36 degrees, which is our first really hot day of spring and summer. Really interested to see how the weather's looking around Australia. Let us know how it is in your part of the world, and if it's good weather for gardening. I think in Sydney, they're looking at a bit of rain and 23, Melbourne 28, Brisbane 29 with some showers, Adelaide 25, so that sounds about perfect for being out in the garden. Hobart 19 and cloudy, nice and cool down there in Hobart. And Darwin, as usual, warmest one of the lot, 33, and a possible storm, which again is not out of the ordinary. So we're going to start up today. We're going to have a talk to Angie from Yates, see what Angie's got planned for her week in the garden and what she's going to recommend we could all have a look at doing to make our garden really thrive over the summer months to come. Good morning, Angie. You there?
Good morning, Darren. Good morning, everyone.
Great to see you again. How are you?
I'm good. I've been out in the garden this morning spreading some dynamic lifter, so I'm a little bit fragrant, but and I do have my gardening gear on from the waist down, so just dispelling any myths. I had dirt under the fingernails and smell like dynamic lifter, so it's a good start to the weekend.
Oh, the early morning is the best time to be out in the garden. I quite often will get out there and do a little bit of mulching or something like that myself. Now, what are you doing in your garden this weekend, Angie?
So really, I want to put some flowers in to brighten the garden up for Christmas. And I've got plants. I'm sure I'm like everybody. I see something in a nursery and I think, I'm not sure where I'm going to put that, but I want it. And so I've got a collection of potted plants. I've got a raspberry and I've got some zinnias I need to put in. And so I'm going to be busy planting in the garden on the weekend. So I mentioned before using the dynamic lifter. So before I plant anything, I'm going to mix some dynamic lifter into the soil. It's really rich source of organic matter, and organic matter in soil is just gold. So the more we can incorporate into the soil, the better. The earthworms will love it. The microorganisms will love it. It helps the structure of the soil, whether you've got heavy clay or the sandiest sand, helps soil hold more moisture and nutrients. So it's all good. And also the slow release organic nutrients in dynamic lifter will feed the plants gently as they establish. So I'm going to be getting lovely and fragrant out in the garden on the weekend with some handfuls of dynamic lifter.
Absolutely perfect. And what else are we looking at doing?
I really want to make sure that I like to think of as putting flowers in the bank. So sowing flowers from seeds, and Yates have been selling seeds that since the late 1800s and got beautiful flower seeds, because if I sow them now, I'm going to be enjoying them in a few months' time. So I really like to have that idea in my mind. If I put the hard work in now, I'll be enjoying them a little bit later on. So I'm going to be sowing things like cosmos and zinnias. You can still sow sunflowers at this time of year, even though it's getting into summer, salvias. So all these beautiful things that not only look wonderful in the garden, it's really important for us to take care of our beneficial insects like bees and other pollinators, particularly if you're growing fruiting veggies and fruit trees. A lot of the flowers need to be pollinated by bees. You can do it by hand. I was out in the garden hand pollinating my cucumbers this morning, but because the weather's a little bit overcast, so the bees are back in their hives at the moment. So, but encouraging lots of pollinators into the garden with lots of flowers. Also, if you're growing tomatoes have an interesting sort of flower that requires a type of pollination called buzz pollination, which European honeybees don't do so well with. And we've got a fantastic little native Australian bee called the blue-banded bee. And what they do is they grab the flower and they shake it really, really fast. And you can hear them in the garden. If you've heard a blue-banded bee, they're really quite noisy, but they are awesome for pollinating tomato flowers. So if you want to grow tomatoes and have lots of fruit, plant lots of flowers in the garden, particularly blue flowers. They love borage. They love salvias. So, but lots and lots of flowers. And you can never have too many bees and butterflies and gorgeous things to look at in the garden. So plant some flowers, and sowing flowers from seed is a really economical way to grow lots and lots of plants. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And also, it is raining. I'm not sure if you can hear it in the background, but it's raining at my place. So it's warm, it's humid, it's moist. That's a recipe for powdery mildew. So I'm growing cucumbers, I'm growing zucchinis, I'm also growing strawberries, I've got grapevines. All of these plants are really susceptible to powdery mildew, which just loves these damp, warm conditions. The first symptoms of powdery mildew people might see is a dusting of white powder over the leaves. Also, the leaves can start to yellow. And when powdery mildew really gets going, it spreads like wildfire, and the plants will be really unhappy, and in severe cases all the leaves will actually die. So that's not so good for my zucchinis and my cucumbers. So I really like to garden as organically as I can in my veggie patch. So as soon as I see the first signs of powdery mildew, I can spray something like eco fungicide in the OCP range. So it's approved for use in organic gardening. There's a concentrate version and a ready to use, which is really handy. So as soon as the first symptoms appear, I'm going to be spraying some eco fungicide just to keep that powdery mildew at bay, because I want cucumbers and zucchinis and strawberries and grapes as well. So that's what I'm going to be doing this weekend in my garden.
Absolutely. Sounds like you're going to be really busy. I love those blue-banded bees too, by the way. I see them in my garden every now and then. They're such cool little bees. They look fantastic, and love seeing them around. So I think I might plant a few more blue flower plants in my garden, get some more buzzing around as well.
It sounds good.
Well, thanks very much for joining us, Angie. It's been a pleasure as always, and I hope you really enjoy your time in the garden and you get enough rain, but not too much that keeps you happy.
That's right. The Goldilocks zone of the rain. So fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Talk to you soon. Well, thanks very much for that, Angie. It's always great to have a chat with Angie. Very busy in her garden by the sound of it. So we're going to jump straight into the Q&As now. And first up, we've got Natasha Jones from Tasmania. Said she's just planted a genie magnolia on their new property, and something's eating the leaves, and there's no idea what to spray or what to stop it happening. You do sometimes see this with a new planting. You put a nice fresh new plant, it's just come out of the nursery, it's got lots of nice soft sweet delicious growth all over it, and the pests just jump into it straight away. If it's got holes in the magnolia leaves, normally I would expect that to be grasshoppers. So it needs to just get out there during the day, in the evening, and even in the morning if possible, and have a look at the plant and see if you can spot what the problem is. If it is grasshoppers, then you'll need to spray for grasshoppers. It may be caterpillars, so some dipel will certainly take care of the caterpillars really quickly. But what I generally find with these plantings is new plants freshly into your garden. They're still a little bit soft from being pampered so much in the nurseries and garden centres. Once you get them out in the garden, prepare the soil correctly, keep them well watered, look after them as you normally would. And those plants quickly harden up to the conditions. They become, the leaves become a little bit more leathery and tough because they're out in the open rather than generally under a shade house. They're not getting as much water, they're not getting as much pampering, and they toughen up and they become pretty resilient to the pests pretty quickly. And you'll find that damaged growth, it'll grow out very quickly, and you'll get fresh growth on that plant. And the the holes in the leaves will just be a bad memory before you know it. But I do recommend get out and have a look and see if you can spot what the pests are. If you've got a lot of caterpillars, you will need to take action. And same if there's a lot of grasshoppers around, you will need to take action so you don't get that plant stripped down to to its poor bare bones. So good luck with that. Magnolias are beautiful plants, and once they get established, they are pretty tough, particularly in Tasmania. Now, Sonia Matilda has a Wirtz avocado in Melbourne, has lots of flowers, but they all fell off. Wants to know whether it needs a mate. Well, Sonia, avocados generally do better with another avocado from the opposite group. So avocados come in two groups, they're group A and group B, and they're male and female flowering. It doesn't always on the one plant, you won't get a good crossover of male and female flowers at the same time. And Wirtz is actually probably one of the works for it. On its own, they don't pretend to produce a lot of fruit. So a pollinator would be the best way to go. Get one from the opposite group. Something like a hass would be a good pollinator. For Wirtz, if you need a dwarf one, a lamb hass is a dwarf form of hass, and that'll be a good pollinator for the Wirtz. But having a pollinator makes a big difference, and you will find a lot more of those flowers will end up becoming avocados. And as we were just talking with Angie, attracting the pollinating insects into your garden, that also makes a big difference. So you get those pollinating insects in, bees and even flies around those plants will make a huge difference to the amount of fruit set you get. Wirtz is a very nice variety of avocado when it's left on the tree long enough as well, so it is definitely worth the effort. Now, Catalina in Lakes Entrance in Victoria wants to know why plum trees are only fruiting on one side, and thanks Trevor and the team, that's our pleasure. For it to only be fruiting on one side tends to suggest that side's getting different environmental conditions, possibly getting a lot more sun, the other side's getting shade. The other side might also be getting damaged and I have seen this happen where I've had people with a fruit tree near a fence line, and there's been a livestock animal on the other side of the fence that's eating the flowers off on that side. Also, if you've got possums will strip the flowers off the plum trees very, very quickly. And if the possum only has really access to one side, it might be why it's only going on one side. But normally it's environmental conditions. So one side of the tree is getting, say, a lot more shade than the other side, less flower set, and then less fruit set. So have a look at that, see if you can work out what those environmental conditions are, and maybe see if you can get a little bit more sun in there, or see if there is possibly something that's getting in there and taking the flowers off. They're the two most likely possibilities. So also sent some, Catalina's also sent some photos of her apple tree, has brown spots on their leaves, and wants to know how often put Epsom salts on the tree. Look, I prefer, rather than putting something like Epsom salts on your fruit trees and on your general garden plants, I would look to use a complete fertilizer, so something that contains a full range of nutrients and trace elements, rather than just targeting one at a time. The little brown spot on the apple tree leaf just looks like a little bit of fungus, probably with this time of the year, with a bit of moisture still around, a bit of warm weather. It'll just grow out of that, hopefully. Just keep an eye on it. If it looks like it's getting worse, you may need to spray a fungicide, and a systemic fungicide on that apple tree might be the best way to go. But if it doesn't get any worse, and it probably will just go away once the weather starts to dry out as we get further into summer. Laura in Geraldton has asked Trevor if he has a favourite bush tucker plant. I don't know if Trevor has a favourite bush tucker plant. I'm guessing he does. I can tell you my favourite bush tucker plant. I like the middenberries. I think middenberries are absolutely wonderful little plant. They're nice to eat. You can use them for a lot of cool things. You put them in salads, even on ice cream and different things like that. They're quite a versatile little fruit. They're sort of a bluey grey colour, so they're very unusual looking fruit as well. Very small, but the plants themselves are really ornamental. I've got one in my garden growing in a large terracotta pot. It's got this beautiful dainty foliage, slight weeping habit, so it cascades over the edges of the pots. Beautiful little white flowers, masses of them. The whole plant gets covered in flowers. It's absolutely stunning. And then you get the little berries, which you can go around and eat. None of mine make it into the house. I just sit there and eat them while I'm pottering around in the garden. I love them. So the middenberry is my favourite. I'll ask Trevor, and he can let you know what his favourite is when he's back next time. just got a message here from Trevor saying good morning to myself, Holly and Nicker and everyone tuned in. He's at 4,000 feet above 40,000 feet above Victoria. So I'm guessing hopefully that's in a plane. So back to the questions. Thanks for that, Trevor. I hope you're having a good day. Leonie in Adelaide has asked, when should you prune the shouldn't be that difficult word to say, faded flowers on her kangaroo paw? Well, Leonie, as soon as they start to look unsightly, you can take them off. This time of the year, because the weather can be a little bit variable, where rather than being slowly moving into the warm weather, we tend to have mild weather and then a sudden hot day, and that sudden hot day can effectively really wreck those kangaroo paw flowers. So prune them off as soon as they look unsightly, take them off. And remember, kangaroo paws, even though they are a native plant, they do like a little bit of supplementary fertilising. So a good quality native fertiliser. I use Troforte on the kangaroo paws in my garden. Keeps them well fed, keeps them healthy, and gives them the energy to replenish those flowers once you remove the spent ones from the plant. So take them off as soon as they look unsightly, and that not only encourages more flowers, but keeps your kangaroo paw looking nice and happy and healthy as well. Moving on to Vicky in Notting Hill in Victoria, has a bunya pine tree in a pot that they're going to decorate with tinsels and baubles for our front yard Christmas display. That sounds like a fantastic option, Vicky. The natural Christmas trees are becoming more popular. We have a lily pilly that we keep in a pot at my house that I use for our Christmas tree. The bunya pine does have those little sharp leaves on it, so I'll recommend when you're decorating it, you take a bit of care, and I'd almost wear some safety glasses while you're doing that, because you wouldn't want to get spiked into the in the eye with those. But once you've got that tree all decorated up, make sure you send us a photo in. It'd be great to see. Kathy Davidson has a Chinese hibiscus. It's a low-growing plant, but didn't think it was a hibiscus and wants to send us a picture. And well, you can send us a picture in, so you can send them through to us via the email, and we can have a look at it that way. Send that through to Holly at guruproductions.tv. Holly will get that picture and put it up. We'll have a look at it. Those ground covering low growing hibiscus, quite unusual, very nice little plants, and flower for a very long period. So yeah, love to have a look at that, Kathy. So Holly at guruproductions.tv, and we'll have a look at that. And we're going to actually put a little clip up right now just to show people, all our listeners, to viewers, to see how to put those photos and get them into us.
Gardening question you'd like us to answer and you need to send us a photo, we'll simply head to our Facebook page and click on message. Type out your question and click the camera icon to take a photo in the app. Or click the image option and select the image you want to send us. Be sure to allow Facebook access to your camera and camera roll. We check our messages regularly, so sit back and be sure to tune in to the Garden Gurus Facebook Live show every Friday, and you'll hear your answer.
Thanks for that, Trev. That looks very easy to do. So we're talking now, looking at Tanya Marisks, I'll probably pronounce that completely wrong, has sent in a question asking for some suggestions to plant under her October Glory maple tree. Her house is a contemporary design, white render with some monument, which is a darky brown grey colour. Well, there's a lot of things you can plant there, Tanya. It depends a little bit of how much sun they're getting. But one of the best plants and most successful plants for planting under trees, I think, are clivias or clivias. You can get those in orange, shades of orange, peach, apricot, cream, even almost dark red colours now. Whole range of different varieties. You can get variegated leaf ones as well. They clump up beautifully under the shade of other trees and tolerate those dry conditions. So you've got root competition, and you tend to have dry conditions under the trees. The tree roots are so effective at removing a lot of the moisture from the soil, and the clivias tolerate that really beautifully. They don't need a lot of care once they're established. A little bit of water, fertilise them a couple of times a year. Keep an eye out for snails and slugs, particularly when they're in flower bud, and they'll reward you with beautiful dark green strappy leaves 12 months of the year. And then in winter and spring, these beautiful bunches of flowers. It's very similar to an agapanthus flower, but in those orange colours, creams, peach colours instead. They really light up under the shade of those trees. So that would be my first consideration. The other thing you could look at that also does really well in those conditions is hellebores. And there's also some absolutely stunning varieties of hellebores available, and they're pretty much in the garden centres just about 12 months of the year. Now, Tanya also has just transplanted 2 magnolias, evergreen ones I'm presuming. Says they've gone brown. She's kept the water up and the fertiliser, but they look dead, and is wondering if there's any coming back for them. Tanya, I've had great success at transplanting evergreen magnolias. I always cut them back quite hard, so I will take about 1/3 off the plants when we transplant them. All you can really do is keep the water up to them. I've had ones that have dropped every single leaf on the tree, look for all money to be completely deceased, and then all of a sudden you see these little new growths coming around. So maybe give it till just after Christmas, see if there's any signs of new growth. If you don't see new growth by then, I'm thinking more likely that they're not going to grow, but really important to keep that water up to them. That soil can't dry out. If it dries out for a couple of days, that pretty much does them in. But if you keep the water up to them and just fingers crossed, apply some sea salt, seaweed solution to the root system, will really help. And don't fertilise. Don't fertilise till the plants have got some good substantial amount of new growth back on them. They're really obviously in a great deal of shock, and they just take a while to recover. And once you see some new growth, then you can start feeding them. But don't give up on them just yet. Now, Deb Perkins is saying she hopes we can help her. So it's 147 square feet of garden. I don't know my feet in inches too well, so I'm not exactly sure how that big, maybe about 50 square metres. And wants to get the Yates 50 litre dynamic 4-in-1 mulch. And how many bags we need? Well, Deb, what I'd recommend for you is have a look on the Yates website. They'll have that product on their website, and they'll give you application rates, because it'll depend on a few things: what you're mulching, what type of soil type you have. And I think 1 bag does about 2 square metres off the top of my head. But I definitely have a look at the Yates website, if you go into your local garden centre, all that information will be on the bag. And as I said, it'll just depend on what applications you're using it for. I've actually been lucky enough to use a little bit of the 4-in-1 mulch. Very good product. I particularly like it in the veggie garden. Annalise Barron said in a recent episode, the Yates 4-in-1 saw the 4-in-1 mulch in WA and can't seem to find the product anywhere, and saying not even Bunnings stock it. Well, it might not. It's a very new product, so it might still be making its way into the garden centres. Have a look at on the Yates website. Maybe send them a little message, or we can ask Angie next time she's on when it's likely to be in the WA stores. But I imagine if it's not in the store by now, it can't be far away. It's been put out on a national release, so you should be able to find it very soon. Now, we're going to take a little break from the questions and talk to Rowan from Garden Express, see how he's going, what's happening at Garden Express. Good morning, Rowan. How are you?
Hey, Darren. How you going? I'm really well. Beautiful day here in Melbourne.
Yeah, well, it's a muggy, sort of overcast, warm day today in Perth, so not as good as Melbourne by the sound of it.
Yeah, it's really glorious. Beautiful. Sun's out. Perfect day to get out in the garden.
It's unusual for you guys to have better weather than us.
Yeah, that's very true.
So what's happening at Garden Express at the moment? What are you guys looking to do, and where are you at with your system as you move through the seasons?
Yeah, so at this time of year, I've mentioned it before, we kind of start to wind down a little bit in terms of sending plants out in the mail. We don't like to have plants obviously stuck in Christmas mail. The weather's warming up and all those sorts of things. So we kind of wind down. We've got maybe a week or 2 left of shipping out, and then we won't ship out until we come back in early January. We'll look after the plants and everything. It's not going to stop people from putting orders in, but we just won't be shipping, just to make sure that those plants do arrive in the best possible condition. But while we do have that break, we bring on some pre-orders of our spring flowering bulbs, which are generally available from sort of mid to late February all the way through to May. But our pre-orders give viewers the opportunity to get their spring a selection of spring flowering bulbs at 20 to 50% discount on next season's prices. So it's a really good way if you're planning your spring garden to make some savings on the price of the bulbs for later on in the year.
Oh, sounds ideal, and it's you can get a little bit organised as well. Be getting.
Well, that's right. Gives you the opportunity to maybe plant, like you say, plan the garden and get the soil prepped, ready to put those bulbs in.
And while we got you here, Ron, we've got a question actually from Margaret in Belgrave in Melbourne. Now, she said, she wanted to ask you, when you're likely to have the rose bushes with two colours back on them. So I'm guessing that's some double grafted roses or double budded roses.
Yep.
She got one or two from you previously, said they're absolutely stunning and would love to get some more.
Yeah, so our rose season is from sort of end of May right through to sort of the end of July. We sell our roses as bare root roses because it's the best way to ship them around. They're dormant at that time, so they handle the transit much better than they do as a bush rose. So yeah, look out for that season, rose season, from about the end of May, maybe even a little bit earlier than that, but that's when we'll have those available.
Perfect. I hope Margaret got that. Now, our producer Holly's put the link up for the pre-order bulb, so our viewers can jump on that and get in nice and early and get the best selection. Now, I believe you've been talking to Trevor a lot about the Wollema pine.
Yes.
And Trevor was very fascinated about the male and female cones, and you said you might bring some in. Did you manage to get a couple of cones?
I did. I've got some here so that people can see. So this one's a female cone. So this one's a maturing female cone. Obviously, that'll dry off like a traditional pine cone. Each one of those spikes becomes a seed, like a normal pine tree. So that's the female cone. And then I could only find a spent male cone. So this one you'll see is dried out and its pollen's already come out, but that's the male cone. So on a Wollemi pine, male cones develop first, and that can be sort of 10, 15 years before you'll start to see those. And then obviously the female cones are as the tree matures even further, they will start to develop on the top of the tree. Interesting thing.
You get both on one tree.
Yeah, you do. So that's another one of the fascinating points about a Wollemi tree is Wollemi pine is they do develop both male and female on the same tree.
Stunning. They're very unusual looking plants, aren't they? The Wollemi pine.
They are. And you were mentioning Christmas trees and native Christmas trees earlier on, and the fact that the bunya pine has really spiky leaves. Now these guys, as you'll see there, look like they're spiky, but they're actually really soft.
It's soft. Yeah.
Yeah, and the Wollemi pine makes a fantastic Christmas tree as it obviously grows a little bit larger. So that's a Christmas tree that's millions of years in the making.
Yeah, definitely. And they'll handle being indoors for like 2 or 3 weeks if you.
Yeah, absolutely no trouble with them. Like you say, you can. They do kind of, and they're making a much better indoor plant. But give them a holiday outside for a week. If you have them inside for 3, put them outside for 1, and just make sure they don't dry out. Yeah. And keep them away from air conditioning and heating, obviously. But fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. I think much better option than a plastic tree, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, thanks very much for bringing that in. It's great to talk to you again, Rowan. Best of luck over the next few weeks as we get through to Christmas, and I'm sure you've got a busy season straight after Christmas.
We do. So that obviously pop into our spring bulb season straight after Christmas. Yeah. It's manic around here.
Well, enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy your weekend, and we'll talk to you next time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Darren. See you, mate.
Well, back to the questions, and our first up is Leah Jarvis, who sent us some photos. And I saw these photos before we started this morning. They've made me very sad, Leah. It's an absolutely what was an absolutely magnificent staghorn that's now gone brown, wilty, all shriveled up. Looks very, very sad. She's really worried about it. Having a close look at the photos and some close-ups and zoomed in at that point where the new growth comes out, it actually looks like it's completely rotted. So I don't know if there was an issue maybe with that retic feed that you've got going into the staghorn where it's been stuck on at some stage and far too much water got in there, or you did say you've seen some caterpillars around. Where that growth point is at the front of the staghorn, where those new fronds come out, that looks like it's been either completely rotted out or it's been eaten out by caterpillars. Both scenarios are not good. I'm probably thinking that the chances of that staghorn recovering are not great, unfortunately. It just looks like that growth point is completely being decimated. All you can really do is, because there does appear to be a fair bit of rot in there, is spray it with some Yates anti-rot, so a systemic fungicide that will clean up any of the fungal diseases that are in there. Maybe let it dry out a little bit, but not completely dry. You can put some the slow release granulated fertilizer for ferns behind that main shield to give it a little bit of nutrients, not too much, just a little bit, to try and see if you can stimulate a new growth. And then it's really fingers crossed and hope for the best. Normally, once that growth point goes on those staghorns, the chances of them recuperating are a bit slim, which is very sad, because that is an absolutely magnificent looking photo of how it was when it was in its full health and full glory. And it's very sad for me to see it looking as sad as what it is, but fingers crossed, hopefully it'll recover. But I would just spray it with the fungicide, dry it out a tiny bit, very light feed of some fern fertilizer, and then hope for the best. Good luck with that. I hope it recovers. Moving on to Jeannie Napier in Beachborough in WA. Was wondering if I can give them some info on the Aussie Christmas tree. We're admiring that at present and thought it'd be really nice to own one. So what I think Jeannie's speaking about is the West Australian Christmas tree, the Noitsia floribunda. It's a beautiful Western Australian native, unlike anything you'll see anywhere else around Australia or the world for that matter. She believes it's a parasitic plant, which it certainly is, Jeannie. Its root system will spread out and latch onto other plants around, and it actually has almost like a harpoon on its root system that spears in to the root system of the host plants, and then it draws nutrients from those plants to help it grow. Its timber is completely different to any tree or plant you've come across. It's almost like a sponge. And right now around Perth, they are in full flower. They're beautiful golden flowers draped all over the tree. Absolutely stunning. If you stand under one when they're in full flower, pretty much all you can hear is the bees and native insects buzzing around in it. They're very attractive to pollinating insects and insects in general. Absolutely stunning. So Jenny wants to know if you can grow one in a garden. Like, you certainly can cultivate them in the home garden. They are a bit of a challenge. If you've got one that was in your garden when you had the house built, it will grow without any trouble whatsoever. But you can go to a native nursery, buy them at some stages throughout the year. They have them available as tube stock or in very small pots. But pretty much 12 months of the year, you can buy the seed. They germinate very readily from seed, but you have to provide a host for them. So when they're young and they're in little pots, you might use a host such as clover that you can just plant at the top to provide that host plant to get the young saplings going. Once they get out into the garden, then they will find some hosts of their own, but they can take quite a while to get going and to get any sort of size on them, and they can take up to 10 to 15 years to flower. But I do know people who've had success growing them from seed and have got them to grow, and I've also seen them available as transplant plants. So as with our native grass trees, when areas are cleared for housing, so the developers go in, clear all the native bushland, the grass trees get rescued. There are some companies that are rescuing the WA Christmas trees as well. They take a long time to recover from that transplant, and you will pay a pretty penny for one if you can even find one. But that is another option you look at as well. So any of the companies that do the grass tree transplants are likely to look at doing the Christmas tree transplants as well. But the simplest way is to buy them from seed, get some pack of seed at your local native nursery, sow the seeds, get them growing, provide a host, and then sit back and be very patient. Eventually you'll get a good sized plant in your garden with some flowers on it. Beautiful plants and look absolutely stunning, and definitely worth having a go. Good luck with that. Mandy Di Stefano has sent us some flowers of a very sad looking hibiscus. Now, Mandy's in Queensland, I believe, and this hibiscus has little warty growths all over the leaves and the growth tips. Plant seems to still be growing, and flowering okay, but it's very unsightly. Now, what they look on there, Mandy, is hibiscus gall. We don't get it. I don't believe we get that gall on hibiscus in WA, so I haven't seen it firsthand. Now, it's basically the best way to treat that is with a systemic insecticide. So you can pick up something like bud killer or one of those that's even Baythroid, and spray the plant a couple of times to kill off the galls. I would also give the plant a light prune off the worst effective foliage, feed the plant and spray it with the systemic insecticide, try and kill those galls off. They do look very unsightly, but they also do sap the plant of energy. So once that infestation gets to a critical mass, it can really affect the health of the plant, and it'll start to go backwards very, very quickly. So I'll be getting on top of that as fast as you possibly can. Good luck with that, and I'm very glad we don't get that in WA. Chrissy Marie from Tasmania has sent in a photo of a newish protea in a pot, and it's not looking its best. And no, Chrissy, it's not looking its best. It looks actually like a couple of things possibly going on with that protea. One, the potting mix is not suitable. It might be not suitable. So with protea, it's very similar to our Australian native plants, so like our Banksias and those type of plants that they don't like, very phosphorus sensitive. So you need to get a native potting mix for that protea. So depending on what potting mix you use. And also just make sure it's that pot's draining well. Proteas don't like wet feet, and some of that effective foliage on there just looks like it may have either got too wet or too dry. The effects the symptoms are the same for both. So just check the potting mix is moist without being too wet and that the pot's draining properly. The good news is that the growth tips and the growth points still look really healthy. So whatever affected it could just even be transplant shock from coming out of a garden centre where it's getting watered 3 or 4 times a day into your planted out in your pot. Might have been a little bit of root damage and not getting as much water. It's a little bit of transplant shock, but I think that will recover. But just check your potting mix to make sure it's okay for natives, and check that pot's draining and make sure it doesn't dry out, and that should recover and get going again very, very soon. Omar KJ needs some help with a fern. It's getting smashed by little grubs, and it started on the other leaves of other plants as well. So it's tried an environmental spray, doesn't seem to work, and recommends anything because they eating the whole plant. Sent some pictures through, and those little plants do look like they've had a lot of grub activity going on them. It's probably just caterpillars. So caterpillars, the easiest solution for caterpillars is Dipel. So you can use Dipel for very safe product to use in the garden. It's a contact spray, so you need to actually hit the caterpillars themselves, and you need to do follow-up sprays as well as if that problem persists, and hopefully that will get rid of those caterpillars, and your fern will start to recover and grow some fresh fronds. Make sure you keep the water up on those as well. The other thing too, there might be a little bit of mites or thrips there. So a white oil or a pest oil sprayed on cool days will help as well, and that will try and get that pest under control too. And keep the plants well fed, and make sure you keep those ferns well watered during the very warm months to come. So moving on to the next one. You got another one up there, Holly?
Yeah. Can you not see?
Nope.
Oh.
That's why I'm asking.
Hold on. Pause. Can you see that there?
I can see the pictures.
Okay. Hold on, everyone.
We're just having some technical difficulties.
Easy.
Holly's on top of it.
I am on top of it. What can you see?
This is the next one. Yep, we
Yes.
see it now.
Okay.
Yep, so we need to go on the next question.
That's the question.
Next one.
Oh, you did the web one.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, sorry, everyone.
Okay.
Lower down.
That
a
was
bit.
my bad.
Lower down a bit. Yep.
Okay. Sorry about that. Little issues, communication issues. Lavina has so she works during the live shows on Fridays now and can't watch them. But that's fine, Lavina, because you can watch via our Facebook page. You can watch them anytime, night or day, whenever you takes your fancy. You can sit there and watch them and enjoy them and get all your answers that you're chasing. She's having a major problem with green grasshoppers munching and destroying her roses. They munch the new buds, the new leaves and the stems. What's the best way to get rid of those pests? Well, if you can get yourself an army of birds into your garden, that's probably the absolute best way to get rid of the grasshoppers. But if you've got a lot of them on there and they are doing serious damage, maybe you can get the Baythroid as a ready-to-use spray, little trigger pack spray, and that will take care of those grasshoppers. It's probably really just a matter of getting the numbers down to allow your roses to get growing and get healthy. Once they're in their full summer growth, hardened off, all that fresh growth is being transformed into solid new growth, that you will have a lot less problems with the grasshoppers. So just a bit of Baythroid just to get the numbers under control would be the simplest way. If you do are able to attract a lot of birds into your garden, you find grasshoppers don't really get a chance because birds love the grasshoppers. Cheryl Lee said, good morning, Trevor and the Gurus team, and would like advice on how to grow a fuchsia. I'm having issues with mine. Fuchsias can be a little bit of heartbreakers, Cheryl Lee, because they don't like a sudden change in climatic conditions. So coming out of winter, spring and into summer, if we do get a sudden really hot day, if you're not careful with your fuchsias, they can drop dead pretty easily. They dry out very quickly, particularly if they've been in the pot or the hanging basket for a while. So making sure they've got adequate potting mix around them. So if they've been in a pot or a hanging basket for an extended period, you may look at repotting them, getting some fresh potting mix around that root ball and allowing the root system to expand and give more access to moisture. You can move them under a bit more shade during the hottest top part of the year. Sea salt, seaweed extract on them during the warm months will also help. So we spoke about with Angie from Yates about Goldilocks zones with rain. With fuchsias, you can get that Goldilocks zone of shade as well. So you want enough natural light coming through to keep the plants actively growing and producing those beautiful fuchsia flowers, but you need enough shade to really take the sting out of the summer sun. So as long as they're getting adequate light, adequate shade, and they don't dry out, a little bit of liquid fertilizing from time to time, and that's all they really need. That if they're in the right spot in the garden, they tend to be pretty low care plants, but they can't dry out. As soon as a fuchsia dries out, it's pretty much the end of the story for that fuchsia, and you need to move on to another one. But they are beautiful plants and definitely worth the effort. So good luck with those, and hope they do really well for you. Karen Murray has sent a message in via YouTube and wants to know how to revive 2 dwarf apple trees that has suffered from root rot in the pots. It's placed them in the ground, but there hasn't been any new leaves. Root rot on the apple trees can take a little time to recover. Apples, although they are fairly hardy trees, they don't like the rot diseases getting into the root system. It can set them back. You need to make sure the soil around them is free draining, so you don't want water sitting there constantly. Keep them adequately watered though during the summer months. Don't let them dry completely out. So trying to find that really good balance where you're watering enough to keep the soil around the root system moist without being sodden wet and not letting them dry out. Seaweed solution, so some sea salt is really good to revive the root system of the plant, and keep it well mulched as well. So get a good free draining coarse mulch around those trees. Don't fertilise them until you see some new growth. Apple trees can be a little bit notorious for being very late for bud burst, so they can come out into their new growth long after the stone fruits have. So that is, sometimes people get a little bit worried about the apples just because they're not on the same timeline as the stone fruits. But basically, if you just look after them for a period of time, hopefully that root system it'll take a little while to get going. Once the root system re-establishes, then you'll see some new growth on the apple trees. But don't give up on them just yet, because there's a very good chance that they will make a comeback for you. Margaret Campion in Belgrave has had a bathroom reno done, saved her old bathtub, and wants to know what best plants she can plant in the bathtub. It would be better for water lilies. Maybe the dwarf water lilies would go all right in the bathtub. They might be a bit shallow for the full-size ones, but you can use a lot of what we call the marginal plants, so the plants that grow in the boggy conditions around the outside of ponds. So things like canna lilies and the beautiful Louisiana irises will do really well. And there's a whole range of really nice sedges and ornamental grasses that will do really well in those sort of boggy conditions. Ideally, if you're not going to grow water lilies, so you're not going to turn it into a little pond, you'll need to get some drainage in there, and then you can fill it up with some good soil and potting mix, and plant those type of marginal plants in there, and they'll give you a really nice display for much of the year. Teresa Elliott wants to know a safe spray for getting rid of rat's tail grass. Teresa, I'm not really familiar with rat's tail grass. So I'm assuming it's a type of weed. Probably if you want to use a really low impact spray, something like Slasher, so you can hit it in the hot weather. Best time to spray the sprays like Slasher is in the really hottest part of the day. Really thoroughly cover the foliage. Very safe to use. Just don't get it on any other plants because it can damage the leaves of any plants, other plants you get it onto, and that should die that back. You might need to reapply it a couple of times to completely kill the plant off. It might reshoot after the initial application, but persist with it and you'll eventually get rid of it is probably the best case scenario there. It doesn't sound very pleasant, rat's tail grass. Susan Jameson in Scarborough has a young crepe myrtle with powdery mildew. Wants to know what to do. Well, powdery mildew can be an issue with crepe myrtles, particularly the older varieties of crepe myrtles, the ones that were available before we had varieties bred specifically to be powdery mildew resistant. So I have seen a little bit of it around. So something like Rose Shield spray is a systemic fungicide, so that's a really good option with the powdery mildew, or you can use the eco fungicide, and both of those are available as ready to use little trigger packs, so they're very easy to apply, very easy to use. You're not having to mix any chemicals together. You just go out there and spray them directly on the foliage. You might need to apply that a few times. Read the label on the container very carefully so you can see if there's any issues with temperature this time of year, whether you need to not apply them when it's hot. So just be very careful of that, because you don't want to burn the foliage while trying to get rid of the powdery mildew that's damaging your foliage. If there's any leaves on there that are really badly affected, it may pay to give it a light prune off, a light feed, and keep the plant well watered. And you should see, as we come into warmer and drier weather, that powdery mildew will eventually disappear and the new fresh foliage will be powdery mildew free. Aaron George in Mornington in Victoria has planted 2 Cavendish bananas early in spring last year. It's heard to remove that he should remove all the pups to become the next fruit, and just leave one to become the next fruiting stem. What's the best way to do it, and how deep do you need to go to remove the pups, and how often in future growth? Well, Aaron, the sort of general rule with bananas, if you have a clump of bananas, is you want 3 bananas trunks going at once. So you've got a mature trunk that's just about ready to produce fruit, one that's halfway to that point, and a little pup. So you have 3 going at once. Once that mature plant has had fruit, you've harvested bananas, you cut that down to ground level. Chop your old banana trunks up and put them through your compost, or even just put them into your garden bed. As with banana fruits, the banana foliage and trunks are really high in potassium and a lot of other nutrients, and they contain a lot of moisture as well. So if you break them up and put them around and mulch your garden with them, they'll feed your garden soil as well, and naturally break down and improve your soil. So that's another benefit of growing bananas. But about 3 trunks at once, you pretty much, if you have a sharp shovel or spade, you'll be able to get those pups off really easy. Just run down the trunk, they'll slice through them, pull them off. You can then pot them up and they will grow very easily, and you can either plant them elsewhere in your garden if you have a big enough space, or give them away to family and friends, and they'll grow very quickly and easily. It's amazing how quickly the banana pups will recover from just being literally hacked out of the ground. But yeah, as I said, the general rule, you want one that's close to maturity, one that's about at that halfway point, and a pup, and that's the ideal way to manage a banana crop. But it's not absolutely critical, and it's you'll go, if you drive around some of the areas with older banana clumps around, you'll just see a forest of bananas, and plenty of them will be fruiting as well. Bananas are one of those few plants though that will spread over time, so cutting some of the stems out and cutting some of the pups out while they're young does give you that capacity to manage the size that clump's going to get to, because they can get pretty big and cover up a fair bit of space. So keep that in mind as well, and good luck with your bananas. Brad Thompson in the Yarra has said azaleas have finished flowering and wants to know whether they should, whether Brad should prune them now. Absolutely, Brad. If those azaleas are finished pruning, you can go through and give them a complete all-over prune. Don't be scared to cut into the old growth with the azaleas. They will reshoot very happily through old stems and old wood. One thing I would keep in mind though, if you're coming into hot weather, so here in Perth, all the azaleas are just about at the end of their flowering season, but I wouldn't be pruning them right now because we're coming into this little burst of hot weather and then it cools down next week. So in those situations, I would wait till next week to prune your azaleas. Easiest way to prune them is a pair of old-fashioned hedge trimmers. Just go all around the plant, neat them all up. And that also can remove any foliage that's been damaged or infected with things like red spider mite and thrips, and also any flowers that might have had azalea petal blight on, and you can remove them away from the plant altogether. If you've had issues with either of those 2-3 pests and diseases, bag that foliage up, put it in the bin, don't put it in your compost bin, and that will get rid of some of that source material for that pests to reinfest your plants next year. Give them a good water after pruning, a light fertiliser, and make sure they're well mulched for summer. And before you know it, those azaleas will be covered in fresh foliage. You'll get a lot more growth, and off that new growth coming into autumn next year, you'll start to see all the flower buds. So as long as the weather's not too hot, do them as soon as you want. Marcia Blake and Harvey in WA, what fertilising routine does recommend for pumpkins and tomato plants that they're starting to fruit? Well, when you've got the pumpkins are up and growing, they're growing good rich soil, you've fed them at the time of planting, you've liquid fed them at the time of planting. If you're mulching them with a good feeding mulch, you don't really need to add a lot of, particularly the pumpkins, a lot of extra nutrients to them. They will happily go along and do their thing and produce those great big fruit. With your tomatoes, I like to liquid feed them sort of once a week, once a fortnight, depending how busy I am, with something like half strength power feed during that flowering and fruiting period. The key with both of those fruiting plants is to have really good soil in the first place and to mulch with a feeding mulch, and then you'll get those beautiful pumpkins and lots of delicious tomatoes. Pete Davis in Adelaide wants a low impact way to deal with mites in their berry vines. I can understand that being a problem you want to get on top of, Pete. I'm seeing a lot of sort of bramble vines, particularly things like thornless blackberries, loganberries and youngberries, those type of berries that have got a lot of mites in them. Probably the best low impact way to deal with them is with spraying white oil or pest oil. Again, just be really careful with the temperature sensitivity of putting those particular sprays. So white oil, you don't want to be applying temperatures above something like around 28 degrees. If it's going to be hotter than that, I would avoid it, and you'd want probably 3 nice cool days after, or 2 or 3 nice cool days after spraying, after you spray that white oil onto the plants to impact the pest, but not then burn the foliage on your berry vines. Very good idea to get on top of those mites very early in the cycle on the berry vines, because they can invade those vines very, very quickly and form significant colonies, and they're very fast breeding, a very short breeding cycle. So breaking that breeding cycle early is the way to go, but the white oil or pest oil is probably the best low impact way to go, Pete. Kerry McClure from Rolling Stone in WA, my neck of the woods, was able to obtain a magic bean tree yesterday. I've never heard of these before, and so of course needs to know how to look after it and what to do with it. Well, the magic bean trees, it's Canstiospermum. It's a native of the cool rainforest areas of northern New South Wales, southeast Queensland from memory. Will grow into an absolutely humongous tree if you let it. It does get used a little bit as an indoor plant and as a little sort of tabletop plant where the producers will put 4 or 5 or more of these little these beans, that are actually quite sizable beans, into a pot. They sprout out and they have this beautiful foliage coming out of the top, and they look very cool. But unless you have an absolutely huge garden or significant amount of property, do not plant them in the ground, because they will get absolutely massive. Have a beautiful flower in the summer months, so oranges and reds and yellows. In amongst all this beautiful dark green foliage, make magnificent shade trees, but they are a very big, significant tree. They're more of a park tree than the garden tree. but you can keep them in pots for a very long time. You can grow them in a largish pot and cut them back very hard every sort of 3 to 5 years and manage them like that and keep them as a patio plant, or if you've got a large atrium or something like that in your house where you can have it as an indoor plant. But pretty easy to look after. Just don't let them dry out in those little pots that they come in, and repot them once they're sort of hardened off a bit and they're ready to go. But again, don't plant them in your garden; they get too big. Gary from South Guildford had a massive increase in their community this year with snakes. They seem to get a lot of snakes every year when it warms up and getting closer to the house, and that's due to all the development out in that area around Guildford in Perth, where the bushland has been turned to houses, so the snakes are looking for somewhere else to live, and they're probably thinking, well, you've come and lived in my house, I'm going to come and live in your house. Any advice to deter snakes? Look, I know there's stuff on the market that you can put around your garden that's supposed to deter snakes. One of the ones I've seen out with supposed to put an ultrasonic bead into the ground that's supposed to deter snakes. I've actually seen pictures of snakes sleeping on the top of them, so I don't know how well they were. Snakes generally live by the rule, if you leave them alone, they'll leave you alone. It's very hard to actually deter them out of your place. You would have to fence your whole property off with mesh small enough that the snakes can't get through. And baby snakes are quite small, so they'd still be able to get through it as well. The thing I think with snakes that people need to be aware of is really understand how to deal with the snake issue if you've got a snake in your house. I know in Perth it's probably the same all around Australia. There are professional people who will come and relocate a snake from your garden if you've got a persistent snake in your garden and it really worries you. But if you've got kids around, you tell them obviously don't go anywhere near the snake. And the other key, if you do see a snake, is to don't take your eye off, watch where it goes. If you turn your back on it, then you don't know where it is, and that's a bigger problem than any. It's basically, it's not much you can really do to deter them from your property other than physically stopping them from coming in. And you've got a dog and a cat. Cats, pretty much, there's not a lot you can do about cats, but there are some dog trainers that will train your dog to avoid snakes and to not attack or try and play with snakes. So you can look at that option as well. Other than that, I can't really offer you any more advice. Maybe talk to your local dog trainer and see if they can give you advice about how to deal with your dog around the snakes. Moving on to Steve McGrain has been watching YouTube and has commented that bug sprays kill bees. Can you recommend one that isn't toxic to bees? There are a lot of low impact bug sprays, Steve, that are far more targeted. So we use Dipel for the caterpillars. It's only targeted at bees. But whatever you're spraying, if you are concerned about bees and other insects, so you don't spray in the middle of the day when those things are active. You try and spray either very early in the evening or very early in the morning or very late in the evening, when the bees are no longer active, they're already gone away. And if you can keep your garden healthy by having plenty of different flowering plants that attracts birds and other predatory insects into your garden, you'll find that you'll have such little amount of insect pests that you won't need to spray at all. White oil is very safe to spray around. It won't affect bees anywhere near as much as any of the other pests. And again, particularly if you spray at times of day when the bees aren't active. But it's a very fair concern, Steve, and I know most people in the industry are very aware of it and go out of their way to garden in such a way to have as low impact on our bee population as possible. Chris Hansen wants to know what fixes tomato blight. Well, tomato blight's a really bad fungal disease of tomatoes. You need to leave the area fallow for a period of time, so you grow your tomatoes in different spots all the time. If you've been having issues with it consistently in your garden, then you may need to look at growing your tomatoes in pots and in potting mix out of the garden soil. But don't grow your tomatoes in the same spot all the time, because that just really keeps that population of tomato blight going. And there are a couple of systemic fungicides that will help keep the issue under control to a degree, but the main one is not to grow in the same spot for more than 1 year in a row. And if you're having consistent problems with your garden soil and tomato blight, then try growing them in pots and making sure you've got good air movement. Okay, so time for the competition winner. This week's lucky winner of a $50 Garden Express voucher, so you can put that towards some of those beautiful spring bulbs, is Leah Jarvis for questions about her very sad elkhorn. My fingers are definitely crossed for you, Leah, with that elkhorn. I hope it recovers because it was looked such a beautiful plant. Congratulations. To claim your prize, just message us on Facebook or via the email and we'll sort that out for you. Make sure you hit the like button, everybody. We really appreciate your support. If we didn't get to your questions today, we have them saved and Trevor will get back to them next week. So keep sending them through. It's good to have a whole heap ready to go when we first sit down. Thank you so much for your questions. I'm sorry if I didn't get to your one today. Thank you for flexibility with these times over the last few weeks. It's a bit of a crazy time of the year for everybody. We should be back to normal scheduling next week. But check out our Facebook page the night before to confirm times and even possibly changes of hosts. We'll be back next week with another live show. Tune in on Facebook or on YouTube. Continue to send us your questions or photos via Messenger, or you can send them directly to our producer, the lovely Holly at guruproductions.tv. And don't forget to include your location. It really, really helps. Remember, you can always jump on our website and catch up on previous stories on the Garden Gurus from the Garden Gurus at gardengurus.tv or on our YouTube channel, thegardengurus.tv. And of course, tune in for another episode of the Garden Gurus tomorrow at 4:30 on 9 Live in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Adelaide, and 9 in Perth at 12. Thank you very much and happy gardening, everyone.